Well, hello everybody, and welcome to the Tech Trailblazers Tech on Fire video stroke podcast. My name's Rose Ross, and I'm the founder and chief trailblazer at the Tech Trailblazers. And I'm delighted to be with Jon Collins, who's an analyst with GigaOm, and is joining us to talk about DevOps. Hello, Jon. How are you?
Hello, I'm fine. Long time no speak, Rose. Good to speak to you.
Yeah, definitely. Been a while, but then we usually bump into each other at things like Cloud Camp and stuff like that and events. So unfortunately not been an opportunity over the last year or so. So I thought it would be great for people, as we were just discussing earlier, who somehow don't know you, to find out a little bit about Jon. So who are you and where do you come from, Jon Collins?
Well, how far back? I mean, so I guess the most relevant to this conversation is I did actually start as a programmer 30 odd years ago, which is quite scary. And then I was very, very lucky, completely lucky. I had no idea at the time. This was a graduate scheme, but I joined a little company which happened to be doing most things right when it came to software process and so on. And it was a subsidiary of Philips. We were building CAD systems. And it was a tight ship. We were out in the countryside in porter cabins using HP Apollo workstations. But it was quality was high. We had configuration management. We were testing things. We were building on a platform. And I read a book called Peopleware back then by Tom DeMarco and Timothy Lister. You're getting the full spiel here. And it was all about. It was all about how to do software right. And it fits in that kind of, all the books like The Mythical Man Month and those sorts of things. It was one of that genre. And I read it and I thought, well, that's all obvious, but it's what people are doing anyway. So why write a book like that? And then I went to another company, which a subsidiary of Alcatel, and where we were, it seemed like every single thing that they said, don't do it that way, was done at Alcatel, and I ended up running the software tools and the development environment for it was started as about 35 developers and ended up as hundreds of developers and hundreds of systems and databases and all kinds of things and networks that I had to run, and I ended up with a team of 10 people and lots of stress, but it was just fascinating. So largely I think that's where I've come from, and I've worked as an analyst, as a writer in tech over the years, as a consultant. But interestingly, with DevOps, the whole thing's come full circle. So I've gone back to the roots of what I spent most of my hands-on career doing. And I guess the first thing that I had to worry about when I started covering DevOps about 2 or 3 years ago was I'm going to get found out. Of course, the world's completely new. It's all moved on. It's all microservices now, isn't it? And everyone's cool and everyone's young, and I'm going to have nothing to add. And then I started to find some chinks in the armor, and I realized that a lot of the things that we were trying to fix back then were still problems now. And just because it's got a fancy umbrella title on it, like DevOps or Infinity Loops or CI/CD or whatever it happens to be, there's still a lot of work to be done, which is my starting point for the research. So I did put a report together called something like Scaling DevOps in the Enterprise. It had a fancy pants title like that. But essentially what I meant by that was, here's all the things that if you don't do them, you're always going to struggle to do DevOps at scale. And that was based on loads and loads of interviews, finding out what people were kind of finding easy these days. And there's so much very different to what it was back then, like building on open source platforms, the cloud, etc. But there's still a lot of things that people are really struggling with. So that's kind of set my stall out for DevOps, really.
Cool. Well, I mean, that's one of the things is the Tech on Fire is going to look at, because we're celebrating our 10th edition. So we're having a sort of looking back over the last 10 years and looking forward over the next decade. So can you give us a little insight into some of those challenges? And that'll probably sort of go nicely into that whole startup conversation, because the startup world tends to be where people go, oh, there's a problem, I'd like to fix that. And I think I could build a business out of that.
Yeah, and that's so true, and particularly true in the world of software development, because it's almost a self-fulfilling prophecy. The world of software development is full of developers. So when they spot something that they think needs fixing, they build something. If you're in the world of enterprise apps, you wouldn't kind of create another enterprise app on the fly in order to, or the world of storage, you don't suddenly go out and get the soldering iron out and build your own storage. Whereas the developer world is full of programmers that are thinking, I can fix that. I need to sort that out. And they're building front ends, they're building tooling and so on. So that is a blessing and a curse. I think the challenges for DevOps are in part created by that, in that when we look at the kind of DevOps landscape, if you like, there's literally hundreds of companies. There's 248 at least. Smaller, larger companies that are all doing something that would fit under the umbrella of what we might call DevOps. And then there's a whole bunch of companies that don't fit under that umbrella and have got no intention. They're still quite happy talking about application lifecycle management or requirements management or old school terminology, or stuff that just doesn't fit in that world. So we do have a problem of fragmentation in the tooling, but then also the fragmentation notion is the same word can be applied to what we see in the enterprise. I remember one big bank saying, we've got 5,000 pipelines, software development pipelines. That's because we've got 5,000 products that we're building, and each one has a different pipeline. So literally, the way that we build each one is unique. And one of the organizations we're working with at the moment, they're trying really hard to work out how to create common frameworks and standards that mean that they're not maintained. No company wants to be the best in the world, apart from software vendors. They don't want to be. No big bank wants to be the best in the world at software pipelines. That's not what they're there for. Speaking to an online travel organization, they said, we want to be famous for brilliant travel experiences. We don't want to be famous for brilliant network engineering. And it's the same with this. So a significant challenge is there's no standards. I kind of take it off to the hyperbole, but there's no standards. There's no common frameworks. Anything goes. It's very chaotic environments. And that's obviously overstating it. But I think realistically, where we are with all of this DevOps stuff is there's loads of highly successful smaller projects. There's a very small number of highly successful major projects, and everyone automatically goes to the Netflixes and quoting these massively successful cloud-first organizations, Twitter and Spotify and so on. But getting from, if you're any organization that isn't cloud native and you're looking to get from small levels of success, pockets of success, to turning your organization into digital first, cloud native, et cetera, yada, yada. There's just this big gap without knowledge in it. It's a massive gulf, and you've got to cross that gulf yourself at the moment. There's no set, agreed, standard way of getting you from those proof of concepts that have been brilliant to everything working brilliantly and you being a digital first company. That's the problem. So
how are startups going to, over the next 10 years, be part of solving those problems?
Well,
do you think? Well, okay, let's John, get your crystal ball out.
Well, I mean, every challenge is an opportunity in disguise, right? So it's, and the disguise is, the opportunity isn't particularly well hidden. It's sitting right out there, blindingly obvious, I think. The nature of how we build applications is continuing to fragment. And that's in part the way that it's almost Sorcerer's Apprentice stuff. I know that gets overquoted, including by me, but just because you can create something new, that doesn't mean you should, but people still are. So there's new platforms appearing all the time. There's new vendors appearing all the time, et cetera, et cetera. But at the same time, so the alternative to chaos is order. And so the opportunity is, how do we order this? And that's the kind of massive overstatement as well. But the tools that we're currently giving people are acting at a certain level. They're helping people build things. And what they're not doing is recognizing that we don't just need builders here. We need architects, we need planners, we need managers, et cetera, et cetera. And the tools available to those people, the other stakeholders, are lacking. So there's two things you can do. Either, there's possibly three things you can do, because AI is always the kind of third thing that everyone mentions. But either you can make it much, much simpler, or you can provide better management. By much, much simpler, either you take away the fact that things are so complex. And so one big trend that we're seeing is low code, no code, all of that kind of stuff, even RPA, robotic process automation. And some of the platforms, Salesforce, ServiceNow, one end of the scale, Appian, Mendix, the pure play low code providers, et cetera, they're just making it easier to build things. And therefore, if it's making it easier to build things, it's also easier to manage building things. That's one doesn't necessarily lead on to the other, but the way that they're doing things, it kind of does. So whilst, I could dine out on this for weeks, an ex-programmer, therefore, whilst I'm an ex-programmer, I recognize the value of building something with code. Equally, I recognize the value of building something where you don't have to encode every single statement that needs to take place. So there's huge value in just simplification of certainly the simpler tasks. And there's probably an application of the Pareto principle there, which is, low code platforms could fulfill 80% of application requirements. If you want to build something that's very, very similar to what everyone else is doing, you shouldn't have to build it from scratch. So there's that end of the scale. Meanwhile, the second pillar is, let's make it more manageable. And I'm seeing, I think we're all seeing a wave towards more standardized architectures, and then more standardized ways of managing things, and then more standardized tooling to enable that management to happen. So the through no fault of anyone other than it just seems like a kind of trend. It's just the way everyone's going. We're seeing the Kubernetes target, if you like, container-based microservices target with Kubernetes as the orchestrator. So it's giving a focus on if there's 5,000 different places that your application might end up in the structure it might look. This is like, well, why not use that one? Why not build something using containers, and then you can deploy it using a vendor solution that plugs into Kubernetes engine, and then you can redeploy, et cetera, and then when someone else comes along, they recognize it. They know what to do with it because they recognize the microservices. They know how to build containers, et cetera, et cetera. So that kind of standardization of architecture is taking place at the moment. We saw last year 20% of enterprises we surveyed were actively deploying Kubernetes, but a much, much larger number was actively pursuing the deployment of Kubernetes. And already, fast forward a year, and I think that because the next thing that comes out of that is things like GitOps, which is, right, you're deploying in that way. How about we standardize how deployment looks? And that's GitOps. And then from that, you then go, well, if we're all going to follow GitOps, which, open bracket, it's GitOps involves storing configuration information for the deployment in the same place as the code.
Mm-hmm.
And then you get an orchestrator to pull the information about how the application should be configured from the same place as the code, in the same way a compiler would, so that you're never thinking about, will this deploy? The deployment engine is doing that for you. And then if there are any changes post that happening, because someone's gone in and tweaked the deployment, then an alarm goes off and you say, yeah, we need to fix that. And it needs to go back and be, the configuration information needs to be updated, so that they've got this kind of closed loop thing going in GitOps. So that you can run entirely virtualized applications in code, and everything's stored in configuration management under Git, or in Git under configuration management rather. So that's a really, really positive development. And the result from that then is that vendors across the board think, well, if they're doing it, we'll do it. So, Weaveworks kicked this kind of thing off. Then you've got Microsoft that are really keen, IBM are really keen, loads of other vendors, CodeFresh are really keen, GitLab are really keen. They're all talking about GitOps now. And suddenly GitOps becomes a standard way of doing things, which is fantastic. So that's kind of groundswell stuff. And then from the top down, there's a kind of, how to put this politely, a kind of oh for crying out loud moment from a manageability.
That was very restrained, actually.
Thank you. I appreciate your thought. So from a manageability perspective, there's a point of no return. We can't carry on going this way in terms of just building more and more things less and less efficiently. And from that kind of need, we're seeing a lot of interest at the moment around manageability capabilities. So that means tools that go to the people overseeing development that then help them specifically identify bottlenecks in development. We're building and building and building, and everything's arriving at testing, and then testing's really slow. And so it's just ending up with this glut of things that need to be tested. And then we all have to stop for 3 weeks while testing happens, kind of bottlenecks. And there was a lack of tools to enable people to see that and then know what to do about it. But then value stream management's emerged over the past couple of years as a technique, which in layperson's terms, it's kind of, let's apply business process optimization to software development. It's like, it's all about spotting looking at something, working out where its inefficiencies are, and then improving it at a process level, but doing it specifically for software development. So value stream management tools, a lot of them like IBM's Urban Code Velocity, it shows everything as little bubbles in spheres moving through. So you can actually see the bubbles, kind of one sphere full of little bubbles and the next sphere empty. And you kind of go, we've got a bottleneck between those two spheres. So very easy visual mechanisms for managers and more senior roles to see where they need to and how they need to improve things. And others, tools like TaskTop are coming and thinking of things like, are developers happy? We've got everyone working really well, but everyone's super stressed. This can't be right. So, just basic stress levels can also be monitored. And then the masterclass of value stream management is great. We've got everything working super efficiently, but the results are useless. So we've delivered 3,000 functions over the past 6 months, but no one wants them. And that's not increased our sales. That's not increased our levels of customer satisfaction. And it's just a bunch of shelfware. So the masterclass of value stream management is saying, are we building things of value? Are we delivering things of value? And then are people getting value out of them? VSM, value stream management, is clearly a big thing at the moment, because you can tell, because suddenly everyone's trying to differentiate. So it's not value stream management, it's value stream insights. That's far more important. And when people start playing these marketing games, that it's, the bandwagon is well and truly rolling. And we're seeing other aspects of that kind of thing. We're seeing a growth of things like policy as code, infrastructure as code, management and testing. But overall, and the whole shift left and DevSecOps and that kind of thing. But overall, it's all about how we can stop worrying about doing things. We're doing things fine, or we're not, but we can always improve there. But that stuff can work, can look after itself for a bit. How about we focus on how we manage it, how we secure it, how we de-risk it, how we make sure that we're delivering the right stuff out there. That's where a lot of attention is going.
So, kind of there are a couple of things that kind of struck me within that. I mean, what you're saying is obviously one of the things about the developer community is they do like to get in about the weeds of the code. So it's not surprising that we're seeing all these sort of like splinter factions of codes and platforms and, this variety of different options for people to code in from that perspective. I was going to ask about the low code, no code. I mean, is this the death knell for developers? I'm sure not. But it sounds like there's more of this move to what I would describe in my sort of non-developer world as sort of building blocks for products, software products, and that if you're using the same bricks, you're going to, just have a foundation that would be the same across a number of different things. Or am I oversimplifying things there?
No, you're definitely not. And I think that there's a number of philosophical mistakes people always make about software. One is...
Well, this is getting very deep now, John.
No,
easy. Easy. I'm going to feel I'm now longer of the Greek philosophers now.
It shouldn't, but it's in Greek terms, it is a dilemma. It's two conflicting theories. One is that things will inevitably get simpler and simpler, and they don't. Software has stayed as complex as it's always been because there's always different ways you can write things. There's new languages you can produce. There's new platforms you can put things on. There's market differentiation. Right now with Internet of Things and all the different ways that's driving new chipsets and all the things around AI and how that's driving new ways of data collation and collection and the way that architectures are fragmenting from edge to cloud. That's norm. The norm is an increasingly exponential rise in complexity, and throw in Moore's law and everything else. That's always going to be the case. And then back to back with that is it's always going to be the case that you can stop, think, prioritize, build on existing platforms, look for commonalities, look for modularization. And this is going right back to 1975 and Jordan and Constantine theories of, and this is what good container-based and microservices-based architectures build on, getting that level right, which is between application level and very small bits of component level. There's a level in between, which we're currently calling microservices, which if you manage those, you will be in a lot stronger position than if you try and manage applications, which are too big and cumbersome, and if you try and manage all the little bitty bits, which are too small and fragmented. So that's always the case. So to your point, low code is essentially giving us that middle level. It's giving us platforms. I had some fascinating conversations when we kicked off the low code report with various end user companies. And one said, and it wasn't even that big a company, but they said they got so much more value when they actually engaged with the vendor and then with the vendor's development teams. And I had this minor epiphany as the person was talking about how the development never goes away. It's kind of another form of outsourcing. And when you're speaking to developers and setting priorities and saying, well, that's not really going to work for us, but this might, and so on, then you will get a more solid platform. There isn't this kind of, I think we're always looking for kind of mummy and daddy to sort everything out for us and all the problems will go away. But that doesn't exist. It's about ultimately taking responsibility for what happens within the code and then working with the vendors in that case and the developers to make the code work for you. That's always going to be the case, at the same time as making it a platform rather than making it build it from scratch every time.
Yeah. or as I like to say, don't want to reinvent the wheel, because effectively sometimes that's what they're doing. They're doing exactly the same thing, but just in a slightly different way.
And reinventing, rebuilding the cartwheel, creating the spokes, et cetera, that you don't need to do that. You literally can take a wheel and use it. And people seem to struggle with the notion of either everything's going to be automagical or you need to build it from scratch. And the answer is always neither. It's about getting that level of modularization right.
But as you say, then you should focus on the things that you can control. It does feel a little bit like the things that make sense to standardize on are the things that and partly I feel, obviously, looking very much at this from a startup perspective, people like to, do it in a better way, because they think it's perhaps not as good as it could be, being driven somewhat by the view of perfection. Also, if you have people who are on your platform and they move away from somebody else's, that means you've captured that audience away from whatever one of the competitive platforms or code languages is, for example. But that isn't necessarily, that makes what you're trying to do a lot harder, because you're pulling people away from something and you have to have something quite compelling to do that because of the skills and such like around that. To do.
I think that there's something I want to be absolutely clear. Software development is still super hard. And people building software, we talk about DevOps being kind of the future of CI/CD, and we talk about value stream management being the future of DevOps. And we talk about, no, it's not just value stream management anymore. It's value stream insights and value stream platforms and blah, 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 blah. And then meanwhile, the developers and engineers and managers are sitting in companies scratching their heads going, hang on, we can't even get our build processes right yet. You're over there rushing off over the hill with some brand new concept like a cuckoo with a diamond in your hand. And we're just trying to build stuff, which in the parlance, CI, we're just trying to create, build systems such that we can build it today, change it, build it tomorrow, and do that really, really fast. And so do that continuous integration and continuous deployment thing. And we as an industry are failing our end user organizations if we're rushing off with the latest and greatest next thing and saying, well, it's all low code these days, isn't it? It's we don't need to worry about that stuff anymore. No, we absolutely do. And we need to help organizations in the real world who are still struggling with the basics and basics not as in, oh, it's so simple, why haven't you got the hang of it? But basics as in the fundamental foundational elements of getting this stuff right, which are very, very hard to get right. We're not doing anyone any favors by rushing off with architectures and not helping the engineers, if you like. So that's there you go. I'll shut up there, but
no, it's fascinating. And I would think about it more because I've got some friends who are developers, like, on the job these days. And it kind of makes me think about some of the other stuff you were talking about. I was quite fascinated with these bubbles, though. I like this management bubble.
The bubbles, yeah. They look lovely.
That sounds great. And an empty bubble is not good. But I was just thinking of, people that I know who are developers, and somebody goes to them, why is this bubble empty? And they go, it's the management element of it. Also, you need to be able to understand what's actually going on and see the bigger picture around it all. So, I mean, obviously you've presented it in a very, the simple. I'm sure it's not simple as quite that.
You're trying to paint a picture with words. So.
Indeed. Well, we like the bubble stuff. And then there was something else you referred to, and I thought, oh, that sounds a little bit like living in a bubble. There's a lot of bubbles going on. So this is kind of...
I was thinking about bubble tea, to be honest. I was thinking you could sit and have a cup of bubble tea as you're watching the bubbles go by in your little bubble,
Makes you think of those Goldfish Bowl offices of yesteryear.
100%. Absolutely. So a question you had, by the way, which I'll just, because I forgot to answer it earlier, so I'll say it quickly, and then we can say, is, so where are the opportunities here for startups? Yep. So I've thought of an answer.
Don't feel like you have to go quickly unless you've got, other plans.
No.
Go for it.
So the answer to that is that we're definitely in the manageability aspects, and where you mentioned that the developers see opportunities within their own companies and then build out from there, because they, companies born of frustration, if you like. And Honeycomb's a great example in the observability and IT ops and AI ops space, which was born out of Facebook developers. And there's a company I'm thinking of called ZenHub that's started building a kind of portal onto GitHub in terms of throughput and flow and project management and agile feature management and so on. That was also born out of, hang on, we need to sort this out. And so that kind of building on manageability is really true. But the other thing that I was thinking of as you're talking about low code was, as we're talking about not doing it all from scratch, etc. Verticalized solutions, by which I mean solutions for retail, solutions for healthcare, solutions for manufacturing.
So vertical sector focused.
Yeah. So low code for manufacturing, low code for retail, low code for whatever, linking in with data management for those areas. So either going very vertical like that, or going very horizontal, low code for video, low code for big data, low code, etc. It's not just low code, but there's something for something. At the moment, we're still very much building generic platforms. And although many low code vendors have got kind of more focus than they might put on their website. So some might be more mobile oriented. Some might be more forms and workflow oriented. Some might be focused specifically on, it might be low code, but you can still get very, very, very big applications on the back of low code. So some might be focused on that market. But it's still kind of generic platforms. No one's locking down particularly on the legal profession or any of the verticals I've mentioned or any of the horizontals I've mentioned. So I'd say a big opportunity for startups is to create templated solutions for sectors or for use cases, definitely.
Why do you think those haven't been tapped into yet? Do you think it's because there's, you'd need somebody who's been in that market to go, there's a gap here vertically? Or do you think they just go, oh, look, this is something, are they all tending to go a little bit more tech oriented rather than sector oriented? Or
I think it's the nature of platforms and the nature of differentiation to an extent. However much you want to be specialized, you have to start by building a foundational platform.
Right.
And if you do it right, it's going to be generic. So, and otherwise you're just building a kind of one-off solution for a tiny part of the industry. There's an element which, let's face it, a strong chance of being true that I just don't know about those platforms. So there might be a little low code for legal platform that's fantastically well known in Wisconsin. All the lawyers are using it. All the paralegals are using it. No one outside of Wisconsin's heard of it.
Yet. But they will be now Googling that, and that solution
makes
low
wonder,
code for Wisconsin for legal, as I'm just about to put .com in.
Parallel code.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Who said it was low code? I had to type loads of stuff in there. Yeah. But yeah, I mean, it is, as you say, because if they are focused on that particular sector, why would they be bothering Jon Collins to brief you? Because you're going to be talking more about the tech rather than, and they're going to be looking at tapping into those contacts who are in IT and worried about software in the legal world, or partnering with, people who already service those vertical sectors.
And there are going to be a lot of point solutions. I mean, we know this to be true. been around the block enough to know that in retail or in manufacturing or whatever, there'll be one company that's still the provider of one little bit of software that does one specific thing. The other part of the answer, though, comes from that, which is you can't scale a software vendor by being a point solution. And so if you want to create a platform for the world, the way to do it is to build a set of capabilities that aren't specific, and then to build policy-based templates that enable those capabilities to be used. So I wouldn't be building a low-code for legal solution. I would be building a low-code solution, and then I would be building this is a set of templates or policies or whatever it is that enable it to be used specifically in the legal profession. That's how I'd architect it.
And then from a go-to-market, you might well partner with somebody who's already providing solutions into that marketplace.
Yeah,
and then it becomes a white label thing for them, perhaps. Yeah.
Then you find that legal is actually just a content problem. So then you go to other content-oriented industries, safety critical systems or whatever it is, and then you're duking it out with the people that arrived in that space from the other direction. It was ever thus.
Yeah. So we've talked about low code. What about no code? How's that going to factor in?
It's a very good question.
Because that sounds a little bit harder to get, for me to get my head around, at least. I can get low code because that kind of work that I can get the logic of that. I'm not quite sure where I go with no code, so I don't know enough about it. So please enlighten me, Jon.
Well, you're in safe territory because a lot of analysts don't know how to get their heads around it either. So.
Yay! It's not just
when we did our report on low code, it was and I'm using low code as a kind of generic term to mean low code / no code as I'm talking about it, and I haven't been specific enough. And my bad if someone was thinking, oh, it doesn't mean low code, it doesn't mean no code. I just wasn't tacking on the / no code bit on the end of it. When we put a report together. It was low code / no code. We combined the two different types of vendors.
Right.
As we reviewed that and we thought about it a bit more, probably this time next year, we'll do 2 separate reports. The one on the low code side of things, which tends to be, it's all about use case. You'd use low code if you want to prototype something, you want to build it quick. And then you're going to want to customize it and kind of make it more enterprisey and mission critical from that point. So it's possible that, and the term used is citizen developers. So you might have someone in the business that's able to kind of throw something together relatively quickly. Maybe someone like me who's not touched computers for a while that can kind of go, oh, well, I get the hang of this, etc. And then you can build a front end, you can kind of tack it into a back end, you can put some APIs in, and you've got something, and then you can start building on it. And then where that becomes really powerful is then you get the development teams in behind it, and they start building in the extra security features and the more detailed functionality in the business.
So it's a proof of concept type of scenario.
That's low code gives you a more straightforward on-ramp to a full-scale application. And the resulting full-scale application will be a hybrid of low code and full code, probably.
Yeah.
Obviously, there's a spectrum of things. Whereas no code tends to be for something that is always going to stay relatively small. So it's literally a drag and drop interface. You pull a few bits together that enable some data to come in here. It goes through this, and it pops out the other side. And then so-and-so is informed and it responds to this. And Zapier triggers an event that goes into some other system, etc. But the end result will tend to stay pretty much what you just built. So it's a small part of a bigger cog, basically.
that's going to be static. It's just going to evolve with the stuff around it. It's not going to change the world. It's just going to do that job.
Correct. And obviously these things there's always going to be an exception to prove the rule. And obviously I'm putting myself, and even as I say it,
but you can say I said that. You had nothing to do with that. I just made that bit up. I just talked all over you, and you're not guilty.
You're spot on. And the truth is that there will always be something that proves any of these kind of fixed definitions wrong, because the nature of software is to play with the boundaries. So I would say you will never get a no-code result turn into a full-scale enterprise application. Reality is that's highly unlikely. It's most likely to be some little thing that you produce that delivers on a certain need. It delivers a little mobile app. Maybe it becomes exceedingly useful as that little mobile app, but it doesn't ever kind of transmogrify from a little mobile app and become your pan enterprise warehousing system with full accounts.
Yeah, but maybe it becomes. I'm obsessed with what's happening to no code here. I don't want him to not go anywhere. He's got to have some prospects.
Yeah, well, no.
So
but
he would become part of a low code project, and then he can take over the world. He or she or they.
But it could. You could have a music analogy. It could be that one-hit wonder or three-hit wonder.
It's kung fu fighting.
Exactly. It's the kung fu fighting. It goes out there, it changes the world in its little way, and everyone will remember it forever. So it's got huge success, but it's not like AC/DC, where every year there'll be yet another. It's not scalable from that point of view. It's not a machine. It's not something that will last the decades and evolve and become a whole brand, etc. It will remain kung fu fighting.
I love a bit of kung fu fighting, but then again, I am a bit more AC/DC myself. Being a bit of a rock chick, but I should have worn my red leather jacket, if I'd have known you were going to start talking about AC/DC.
Well, I'm sorry.
That's all right. I forgive you.
But everyone liked kung fu fighting.
They did. So. Well, everybody, we're going to stop myself. I will start singing. So moving quickly on, you touched upon Agile as well, and this well-being stuff. So this is really curious. I was not expecting you to say that. So I always love it when it's a bit of a surprise. And obviously listening to Kung Fu Fighting or AC/DC probably will help raise people's mood. So we can maybe link into, music helping with well-being. I certainly feel better when I've got the radio on. Although other than when I'm talking to you, clearly, because I'm very happy now. But what's this all about? Are we saying that happy developers make better code? Is this what you were finding? I'll not say better. Shall we say better is probably the wrong word. Shall we say? Because the thing is, you talked about the stress element. I mean, everybody knows, particularly in startups, if you look at developers in startups, because there's a huge amount of pressure in a very small team, that type of thing, where you're potentially getting burnout. And obviously that's not going to be good, because then you lose the continuity from that person. Obviously it's not good on a personal level. You do. Certainly from that perspective, there's been lots of talk about it. A lot of developers who, have been in teams are now a lot more remote.
Absolutely.
Is all of this coming to a bit of a head, really? I mean, the pandemic obviously has been very challenging for everybody. And I think, mental health is quite rightly, as one, positive that we could see out of it, has become much more of a conversation piece, because we now have that element of shared, stress around one common thing. Obviously it's impacted people in lots and lots of different ways. Some people, there's been positive effects, some a mixture of both, and obviously some very, very negative. But tell us more about this whole stress conversation. And
well, sure. And I mean, there's so much to unpack, and probably we've only got 5 minutes left. So, as someone who's experienced a lot of work stress in his time, so I had to have counselling and everything else, so I've done my time, if you like. I think that there's a lot to unpack. If we start from the beginning, the very glib thing anyone can say is that it's better to have a more positive working environment. That's an easy thing to say. But then equally, it's an easy thing to forget, and it's not a notion that everyone will share. So, Bleeding Heart Liberal can say something like that, and then the accountants come in, accountants, and say, right, we want everyone to, productivity is our only metric. How many hours were you at your desk? How many function points did you deliver? How many features did you create, et cetera, et cetera? The
KPI focus and the
very
the
KPI
output.
Focused, and all that immediately kind of vanishes into thin air. I think that there's an opportunity to change the language, and there's an opportunity to actually understand what people bring. There's not even a single notion of something called the programmer. Like this guy, we're not all massively engineering focused. There's artists and there's scientists mixed together in the notion of programming, and the whole debate over, is it real engineers or is it artisan, et cetera, et cetera. Some are true craftspeople, some are absolutely dyed-in-the-wool mathematicians, and so it doesn't make sense to kind of lump them all together and say, well, we're trying to make them all happy. And then equally, we've all got tendencies towards laziness, and reality check is if you judge someone on the number of pull requests they do a day, they're going to do more pull requests. Do they need to? Not necessarily. If you're judging someone on the number of things they've taken out of Jira and fixed and redeployed, they're going to pick the easy ones, because then they'll be judged on that. So we as a race are very susceptible to respond to how we're being judged. So there's so many factors to take into account. I would be, particularly given what you just mentioned about home working and remote working and how that's obviously changed. We need to change the language and structure around how we judge success. We need to be giving people the wherewithal to perform in a way that they are capable. And that doesn't necessarily mean one set of rules, even if it goes down to, if you want to move outside neurotypical kind of thinking, and then you want to think about, bringing in people with disabilities and so on and so forth. It's going to have to be about how we create teams with common goals, with impetus, with shared desires and aspiration, with trust. Trust is such a huge element, and with very strong cohesion within the groups. And will that create more success? Possibly not in the short term, but will it create more long-term sustainability? I absolutely believe that. But obviously I've just thrown in a whole bunch of psychobabble. And how do you measure that? How do you make that true? How do you fit it into the tooling? How do you stop people from reverting to type? It's something I call the guru's dilemma, where, you get an agile consultant, goes into a place, gets it all sorted, gets everyone, doing great scrums and daily stand-ups, and everything's working really. Then they go away, and 6 months later, everyone's reverted back to the way they used to do stuff.
Well, it's like fine-tuning a car, though, isn't it? If I want to chuck another analogy in, wear and tear, day-to-day, use, you need to pop it back in the shop for a bit.
It absolutely is. And I don't think there's any substitute for some really good old-fashioned team-based approaches, such as listening, servant leadership, leading from the middle, essentially, and clarity of communication and those kinds of things. So the danger that we've got at the moment with this whole DevOps thing is it's all continuous. It's a need for speed. And I don't actually think that's particularly healthy, because we're creating speed, again, with the car analogy, at the detriment of self-maintenance and the need for pit stops.
Yeah.
So,
and also, are you going in the right direction? Gosh, we can get this motoring analogy going we can keep this going for a while. But there's lots of things about speed, isn't it? But if you're going in the wrong direction, it's not really that helpful, is it? You want to make sure you've got, and that just by, from the feedback loop, you're not going to get the right feedback of moving things. If you look at the whole Scrum and, the sprint, sorry, not Scrum, the sprints there, I'm mixing up my Agile terms there, but the sprint sort of idea. I mean, yeah, but in 2 weeks, you're not necessarily going to get what you need from that, where the product should go. It's
reasonably standard to hear from organizations, we do daily stand-ups, but we don't really talk about what we're going to deliver. Or, we pay essentially the same. We pay lip service to whatever methodology is currently famous, but we still don't do things right. And to me, that holds the answer to everything, or the question that everything should be answered. It doesn't matter what terminology you're applying. It doesn't matter if you're safe agile or if you're whatever, or if you're using value stream management best practice, or you've got the DORA metrics, or what really, really matters is not whether or not you're using the right terminology, or whether you're measuring the things that the industry sees as useful to measure. It's whether you've actually got a fully able from a delivery perspective team, within which there's confidence and trust across, and that level of cohesion across team members. So that's more important than anything.
Well, it'd be interesting to see what kind of startup angles there may be within that over the next sort of decade. So timing wise, anything you'd like to say to wrap things up, Jon? Because obviously we're looking, and this is a big topic, and we've kind of darted into territory that I wouldn't normally let you have got away with, but because I think that DevOps is such a huge part for all of the tech startups that we're, I wouldn't say represent, because that's not the right word, but that are in our ecosystem. It's just interesting because it is really, whether you're in a startup, whether you're in a big enterprise, if you're developing almost that sort of bubble within a bubble, if we want to keep with the bubbles, is like, I'm in DevOps, I need tools to create a tool to help people in DevOps in an enterprise environment. It's kind of it's like DevOps squared almost, potentially.
It's complicated, isn't it?
Yeah. Any particular sort of last thoughts on what the next decade could bring? It sounds like it's going to be a really interesting time, though. Things move really quickly, and then they also move quite slowly as a tide, if that's possible. But
yeah, to be fair, we're never going to fix the human race, and nor should we. It's perfectly imperfect. I actually wrote a song called "Perfectly Illogical," which is very fitting there.
That's very DevOps. That is.
I'll send you a copy.
Brilliant.
But I am a great believer. Just thinking through as you were speaking there, I was thinking, well, what would I add? I'm a great believer in visibility in order to make decisions. And the old, if you can't measure, you can't manage, is absolutely true. But equally, I now am, it's something I learned a long, long time ago, back when I was a programmer, but it kind of has stayed on the surface when other things have descended below. And it's the notion of the win-win. So if we're going to get measurement right, all that we're really ever doing when we're building things is trying to deliver value to another participant. And it's the nature of entrepreneurism. It's the nature of startup. It's the nature of everything we do. We're trying to get value to other people, and we're trying to get value to ourselves as a kind of, I'll give you this, you give me that.
The reward things. Yeah.
And so something that we know isn't true when we see it is when we're giving more than we get. And what right now, I think there's a huge opportunity to create tools that we need. And we're seeing it already in the emergence of employee experience kind of platforms. I do believe that we'll see a lot of these fragmented tool sets. I think one of the opportunities for startups is to just be doesn't matter if you're a feature company, because the bigger platforms are going to need to build in those features. So we're going to see a lot of acquisition over the next couple of years. And what I'd like to see is that the win-win notion is built into those platforms, which to use a bit of consultancy jargon, stakeholder value. So if we go around all the different stakeholders, be it a programmer, be it a customer, be it a manager, be it the company, whoever it is, what are they getting out of it? And the job is, and the tools can give us that information, the job is to know that everyone's gaining proportionately from whatever they're putting in. And so that's what I see as not so much an opportunity for startups, but where I would like to see these platforms developing and delivering.
Brilliant stuff. Thank you, Jon. It's been a pleasure. Well, hopefully we can catch up in person again soon.
You never know. You never know.
Fantastic. Cool. Well, thank you, everybody. Thank you for joining us here on the Tech on Fire podcast with Jon Collins from GigaOm. I'm Rose Ross, who's the founder and chief trailblazer at the Tech Trailblazers. You can catch more from GigaOm for us on our platform, which is www.techtrailblazers.com, or follow us on Twitter at TechTrailblaze, or find us on LinkedIn. Thanks again, Jon.
No problem. Thank you.